Welcome to building ChatGPT AI applications visually, the easiest way to build AI solutions using ChatGPT. In this course, we're going to learn how to build interesting and useful applications that fully leverage the power of AI without getting bogged down in the details of learning how to code syntax or the myriad of technical concepts related to learning a programming language. The approach is 100% visual and no coding background is required. We're going to be building useful and powerful programs that you can deploy without writing a single line of code. Here is a motivating example of what you will be able to build by the end of this course. This is a chatbot that can be embedded right within your website that is trained on your data that is from your website or another relevant source. You'll learn how to build this visually, scraping the information from the website you're interested in, querying their information, and embedding into your website and customizing it. Everything done visually. And here is the code that is used to build it. It's not code at all. It's all visual, built by dragging and dropping components onto the canvas and connecting the components together into a flow. In this course, you'll be building a lot and learning by doing. There are 10 projects ranging from simple to more involved. We'll start first with the introduction and overview of the course and getting set up. Then section 2 will quickly start building your first simple AI apps. In section 3, we'll cover projects on a more common use case to build chat with your data apps, like building a chatbot that you can use for your own PDF or text files. In section 4, we'll build examples of how to integrate your own chatbot into a website and customize it. In section 5, we'll walk through how to integrate your AI apps as a plugin into ChatGPT website itself, that you can then have it interact with other ChatGPT plugins. And finally, we'll show how to deploy your app into production with a popular cloud service provider called Render. For many, writing AI apps can seem daunting and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. Consider, what does success in the course look like to you? It can be simply being able to write your first AI app, or it can be the feeling that you've gotten a great foundation to write more sophisticated apps. I suggest picking something that is meaningful to you. I'm here to help. How do you get the most from this course? Hands-on is definitely the way to go. I suggest reviewing the lectures and follow along step by step, connecting the components. The best way to learn is by doing, and the easiest way to build is visual. And because the builder canvas is visual, you'll see the concepts and how each of the concepts relate with another through the visual composition on the canvas. Let me introduce myself. I'm an experienced software engineer with many years of industry experience. I hold a master's degree in computer science, as well as teaching experience in both industry as well as at university level. I'm a holder of many software patents, but most of all, I'm passionate about problem solving and innovation, and I love building AI applications that solve real-world problems. One additional course logistic. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A discussion area of the course. Posting questions in the Q&A area helps other students learn too. You can also reach out to me directly at my Gmail. I usually respond within a day. Understanding large language models is important, as it is the basis of ChatGPT. Think of a large language model like a super smart robot that loves to read. This robot spends a lot of time reading lots of different books, articles, and websites, so it can learn as much as it can about knowledge in different languages, like English, French, Spanish, and hundreds of others. It even reads code in various programming languages like Python and Java. Once the robot has done a lot of reading, which we'll call the training phase, it gets pretty good at understanding and generating language. It's like how you might become better at playing football the more you play it. Now, let's say you ask this robot a question, or give it the start of a story. This is the prediction phase. Because it's read so much, it can try to come up with a good answer to your question, or a cool continuation of your story. just like a human would. There are two steps in the setup. The first is to obtain your OpenAI API key. This is needed to access the ChatGPT large language model. It's a paid API. For this course and doing all the API calls used in this project will cost about $2 of API costs. It's a very straightforward process to obtain the key. Just go to the platform.openai.com URL and register. The second step is to set up the development environment. For this course, I've created a pre-configured environment for you that you can use to get started with just a couple of steps. Let's look at how to obtain an OpenAI API key. Once you log into the OpenAI website and register, you can create a key within the API keys section to your left. Just select the Create New Secret Key. And once you have done this, save your API key in a convenient and secure location. You'll need this key throughout the course. Now let's look at how to set up the development environment. Once you select the URL, you will be taken to the Replit service. Replit allows very easy access to online development environments that are pre-configured. Select Fork, log in. Once you've forked the Replit, what you'll be taken to is the development environment that has already been created. So I'm going to go into the shell and I will type the command to get it started. So npx flowwise start. So after a few moments, it will start and you can see this in large view and you have your development environment already ready to go. In this video, we're going to go to the basics of building AI applications with no code using a tool called Flowwise. This tool allows the users to drag and drop visual components onto the canvas to build their applications. We'll first go through a very simple example so that you can understand the different elements of an AI application, as well as how they are related to each other. Then, we'll run the application right within the browser. Let's get started. What I have here is an image of this Flowwise application within a Replit, which is an online IDE which you can get up and running very quickly. There is a link to the Replit in the resources section. I'm going to paste the command line to get this Flowwise tool started. And as you can see, it started. I'll open up my window here. And what you see is a starter screen. And in these starter screens, there are chat flows. These are your chat flows that we've already created. In this case, I haven't created anything yet. In the marketplace, this is where all the templates are that you can use to get started and customize rather than start everything from scratch. We're going to pick this very simple translator flow. This translator flow is a template that allows a user to translate English to French. I'm going to select that and want to use this template. We can see here already the different elements of the visual application. We'll go through each one in succession and then we'll run the application. First is the large language model chain. LLM stands for large language models. What this does is that it's a collection of a chat prompt template as well as the model that you're using. I'm going to fill in the parameters. In this case, I'm just going to use the ChatGPT APIs. So I'm going to select the API key here, and then in this chat prompt template, what you've already seen is a prompt. A default prompt in there says that you are a helpful assistant that translates input language to output language. In this case, the input language is English and the output language is French.
we've combined both the large language model and the chat prompt template all within this large language model chain. And now I'm going to save it. And I'm going to say translate. Save. Now I'm going to run it. So how do you do that? It's very simple. Now I'm just going to go to the chat, and this application is live and running. And I'm going to give some examples here. I'm going to say boy in French, that's garçon, and girl, that's fille. And that's our first AI application.
Next, we're going to build a slightly more involved AI application. This application creatively brainstorms product names. For example, if you're starting a business to sell online products, you can use it to help generate ideas for the name of your business. We're going to start from a blank canvas, and we'll drag and drop the components onto the screen and make the connections. I'll introduce you to all the tools in the toolbox of the components that you will use.
Let's get started. So I'm going to build the next application from scratch. This application is a product name generator. Given a name, it's going to create a name for that product. I'm going to go to my button here, Add New, for a new flow, and it's going to give you a blank canvas. In this blank canvas, if you go to the left and press plus here, it'll give you the toolbox categorized into 11 different sections, from agents to chains, chat models, document loaders, embeddings, large language models, memory, prompts, text splitters, tools, and vector stores. So for this particular example, I'm just going to be using 3 of these: prompts, large language models, and chains. So I'm going to start with the large language model that I'm going to use. So you can see there are several you can choose from, but I'm just going to start with the ChatGPT OpenAI one. So I'm going to drag and drop this onto the canvas. All right, great. I have my first component there. Next, I want to get the prompt that I want to use. So prompt template, I'll drag this onto the canvas as well. All right, I have 2 components onto the canvas. And now I'm just going to now drag the last component, which is the chain that I'm going to use that connects these 2 together. All right, here. All right, now I'm going to give it the prompt that I want it to use. So in this case, I'm just going to say, what is a good name for a company that makes the product? Okay, so that's the default prompt that will be part of the chatbot. And then of course, I'll input the API key. And now I'm going to wire the programs together. So I'm going to take my large language model and I'm going to connect it to my LLM chain. I'm going to take the prompt template and I'm going to connect it also to the chain with the prompt. Now I'm going to save it and give it a name. Right? Save. So now it's saved. Let's run it. All right, I'm just going to give it a couple examples. Shoes. Racket. So pretty decent creative product name generator. That's our second application.
One of the strengths of large language models is the ability for it to take a complex topic and summarize or simplify it. In this project, we're going to use the technique of multi-prompt chaining to build an application that takes a complex topic, simplifies it, and then shares that simplification in a form of an engaging tweet. So let's set the stage. Meet Jenna. She is an expert at simplifying difficult concepts that even a 7th grade student can understand. She will take a very complex topic and make it very simple. Meet Sarah. She is a social media expert skilled at creating engaging Twitter posts. We're going to take a complex topic like calculus and first have Jenna simplify it. Then we're going to take the output of that simplification for Sarah to create an engaging Twitter post such as the one we're showing. This is the flow that we're going to build. We're going to start with a prompt template that asks the large language model to pretend to be Jenna and simplify the concept that is specified by the chat. The simplified concept will then be used as input to create an engaging Twitter post.
Okay, let's get started to build this application. I'm on the home screen of the Flowise AI app. I'm going to now add a new workflow, and I'm going to start with my first prompt template. So I'm going to go to prompts, and I'm going to select a prompt template. All right, so this first prompt template will be for Jenna, the person who is able to take a complex concept and simplify it. So here is the prompt that I will give it. So you are an expert at simplifying difficult concepts that even a 7th grade student can understand. Given it a input, write it out in simplified form, and the objective is what I pass into this template. All right. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to now specify what the objective is. So for objective, I will take that from the user question in the chat box. All right. So this is Jenna, the expert at simplifying the difficult concepts. Now I'm going to now hook up a chain to it, a large language model chain. So this allows me to interact with ChatGPT. And then I'm going to hook up my prompt template into this. And then I'm going to instantiate my language model. In this case, I'm going to use OpenAI one. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to input my API key. And wire up into language model here. Now, just a brief word about temperature. So this temperature default here is 0.7. So it ranges between 0 and 1. 0 being the most factual, and 0.7 and 1 being the most creative. So I think for this use case, 0.7 is fine. All right, so let's just test it out. I'm going to save it as my simplify social app. Save. All right, and then I'm going to run it. Okay, the concept I'm going to give it is a calculus concept. So I'll just paste it into the chat box. So the first stage of this multi-prompt is to have it simplify. So this is ChatGPT acting as Jenna, who is the simplification expert. Okay, so it's going to take this fairly complex topic, and then it's just going to summarize it and simplify it. Okay, so here it is. All right, that's a great start. Now I'm going to build the next phase, which is the next in my chain. All right, so next in my chain, I'm going to just copy this prompt template. And then I'm going to also make a copy of this call to ChatGPT, and I'll also make a copy of this OpenAI large language model, and I'll just wire it up here. And then I will also make a couple changes here. So As you recall, the person in the next prompt chain is the social media expert. All right, so this is Sarah, who is the social media expert. So I'm going to change this prompt. So Sarah will have a slightly more complex prompt. So I'm going to paste it here. Okay. So Sarah is a social media expert. Given the following information, your task is create an engaging tweet using emojis as possible. The tweet should start with a catchy summary and have 4 bullet points that follow. So each of the bullet points will have a different line like this. So give this prompt, and then I specify here a little bit more about using emojis in each of the bullet points, and then if needed, break into multiple tweets. All right, and I have here the context of the tweet. So this is the input that I'm going to use is the output from the previous prompt template. So I'm going to save it. And then in here, I'm going to modify the actual input for this. So I'll first hook it up. So I'll hook it up here. Right, I'll connect the output of the simplification to the input here. Now let me just connect this first. And I'm going to change this to output prediction. So this allows me to take the output and into here, okay? So I'll do that here. All right, and then I'll make one more change here. So the objective here, I'm gonna change so that it's the output from the previous box. So it's not the user's question from the chat box, but rather the output from the previous the previous prompt template. All right, I'll do that and I'll save it. Okay, let's go ahead and try this. I'm going to just expand my screen, and I'm just going to give it a fairly complex topic with a lot of text. So this is about calculus, and then I'm going to ask it to go ahead and summarize and then create an engaging tweet about this. All right. One of the amazing things you can do with the ChatGPT large language models is to take advantage of the many different languages that it can understand as well as translate into over 100 different languages. So with just a very small change, especially in my prompt template, I will be able to take advantage of that very powerful capability. So let me just update this template, and I'm just going to add a couple of sentences into my template. So I'm just going to say, in creating a tweet, first translate the content to Spanish and then go ahead and tweet that. All right, so I'm going to save it. And I'm going to now execute this again. Okay. So it's going to run through the flow to simplify this concept and then create a tweet. But in this case, it's going to create the tweet in Spanish. Now let's clear this chat and see how simple it is to now change it to a different language. Let's say French. Save. Save. I'll go ahead and ask the same question. All right, so it has now done the same flow, but given the output in another language. Now, it's not only the Western languages, but also the Eastern languages. So let me just clear this chat again. And then I'm going to modify this Chinese. And save it, execute here. Flow. And the output is in Chinese. So let's do one last example just to kind of give you a flavor of the breadth of the languages that it can support and how you can so easily take advantage of this. So let's take another very, very popular language, Hindi. Okay, let's save it, execute it again. Again, executing the flow. And now you have the text outputted in Hindi. Right. Pretty amazing. The ability to translate to so many different languages just with the change of a prompt. Very, very powerful.
One really useful technique to work with large language models is to give it time to think. Specifically, by telling the large language model to break down a problem into steps and consider each of the options. The result that you get is usually much better. In this project, we're going to use a simplified version of a technique called tree of thought. This technique asks the large language model to generate 3 possible solutions to a problem as the first step. And in the second step, it asks to think more deeply for each of the solutions from the first step before drawing a conclusion. We're going to apply this approach to an AI app called Life Coach. So let's set the stage. Meet Rachel. She is a high-performance life coach and an expert problem solver. Her task is to assist with difficult problems. Meet Ruth. She's looking to switch careers to something that she loves to do, but she's concerned because her new job needs to also support her family at the same time. It will involve taking some risks. So what should she do? So let's look at the flow. In the first step, the prompt we're going to use is act as a high-performance life coach and expert problem solver. Your task is to assist the user with difficult problems. And here's the problem. Suggest 3 possible solutions. Be concise. A lengthy explanation is not required. In the second, the prompt is the last proposed solution results. So we'll take that. But also for each of the 3 proposed solutions, evaluate their potential. Consider the pros and cons, initial effort needed, implementation difficulty, potential challenges, and the expected outcomes. Also, assign a probability of success and a confidence level to each option based on these factors. And then conclude with a recommendation on the best option.
So let's start building. I'm first going to go into my canvas and I'm going to select a prompt. So I'll select a prompt template to represent the first step. In my template, I'm going to use the following prompt. I'm going to say, act as a high-performance life coach and expert problem solver. Your task is to assist the user with difficult problems, and here is the problem. Okay. And I'm going to also ask it to suggest 3 possible solutions without going through lengthy explanations. We'll save that. And then I'll need to add the the prompt values. So I'll go ahead and do that. So the objective will be question from the user's question in the chat box. Right, I will save that. Okay, now I'm going to now add my large language model chain so that this actually executes the call into the OpenAI API. So I'll add this in here, connect the prompt template. And as usual, I'll add my language model. So we're going to use OpenAI. And then I'll just fill in the key. In this use case, we wanted it to be a little bit more creative. So we're going to keep the temperature at 0.7. That's quite appropriate for this use case. 1 is very creative, and 0 is just being very factual. So in this use case, 0.7 seems reasonable. So we'll go and connect it here, and then I will save it. Okay. And then I will see what it comes up with for the first step. So I've saved it, and I'm going to run it, and I'm going to specify the problem that I want it to help me to solve. Expand this. All right, so in the first stage, it asks, it suggests research potential career paths align with your interest and skill set, create a budget, determine how much income you need to support your family, and consider taking a part-time job while you transition into a new career. Pretty good suggestions. So I think that's great outcome for the first step. Now we'll add the next step. So an easy way to do that is just to copy here. All right, I will then copy this as well, and then copy this here. And I'll make the appropriate connections. Okay, I'm going to change this to output prediction. So I want the output of this to feed into the input of the next prompt. And then I'm going to now specify my next prompt. So my next prompt, I'm going to ask it to go to the next level of detail. Okay, so I'm going to tell it. Okay, so have it know what the proposed solution results were from the last stage. And then I'm going to ask it for each of the 3 proposed solutions, evaluate their potential, consider their pros and cons, initial effort needed, implementation difficulty, proposed potential challenges, and expected outcomes. Assign a probability of success and confidence level to each option based on their factors. And then I'll say recommend the best solution. Save that. Then I'll need to look at the results. That is from the output of the previous chain. So I will save that. And so after the first stage, it will come into the second stage, and then I should get my output. So I'll save that. I'll expand my window and then ask my question. Execute each of the prompt templates in succession, and it's going to give me the details of the different options. and recommending an option as well.
A very common use case for the ChatGPT large language model is the ability to chat with your own data, such as from PDF files, text files, or websites. Let's go through the basics of this, and then we'll look at some examples on how we build these types of applications with no code. This is a very high-level architectural diagram. Starting with on the right side, there is an index that writes to a vector data store. In this case, we're showing an example of a popular one called Pinecone. Once this index is built, a user can use a chatbot to query the vector data store for the information that matches most the query. The set of information returned will be passed into ChatGPT large language model as a context for it to answer the question that you gave it. Here is an expanded view of the indexer that we saw on the previous chart. The flow it uses is to take the source of truth, let's say as an example, an earnings report in PDF files, and then segments them or chops them up into chunks. And then each of those chunks we call a document. For each of the documents, it calls something called an embedding model provider to create. Each embedding is essentially a mathematical representation of the meaning of the document. Through the extensive training process, the LLM can categorize similar ideas numerically. So you can think of an embedding as just an array of decimal numbers representing an idea. And the more similar ideas there are, the embeddings will be similar in terms of how they are represented. So let's go ahead and see how this works in practice.
In this video, I'm going to show how to create a Pinecone index. I'm here in the Pinecone console, and I'm going to create my first index. I'm going to name it course. The dimensions will depend on the large language model itself. For ChatGPT, it's 1536. And then the metric we're going to use is default one, cosine. I'm going to select the free starter plan, and I'm going to create the index. So it's going to go, and after a couple of minutes, this index will be live. Just keep note here of the environment. So in this case, it's US West 4 GCP free. This is the zone that Pinecone has assigned to this index, and we'll need to use that when we specify the Pinecone vector store in our flow-wise diagram.
We're going to show how to build chat with your data applications. The first one we're going to build is a chat with data in a popular service called Substack, where authors share their analysis on various topics. We're going to build a flow that takes a web URL with the analysis that we want to chat with, and we're going to store that into a vector store, which is essentially a database for AI applications, and then we're going to use it to chat with it.
In this example, we're going to create a chat with your data application. It's going to take an article that is quite a lengthy one from Substack. In this case, it's about NVIDIA and analysis on the company. And I'm going to create a flow for it that allows me to chat with that data. So first, what I'm going to do, I'm on the home page of Flowwise, and I'm going to add new. I'm going to start dropping components into it. So what I'm going to do is load this information first, and I'm going to pick this Cheerio web scraper. So this component allows me to take a URL, in this case, and scrape it, and then produce data that I could query. All right, so I'm going to create this component, and feeding into it is a text splitter. So a text splitter is a component that takes a document and breaks it up into chunks. All right, so there's a default of 1,000 tokens, and I'm going to do a little bit of overlap to allow for better searching. And I'm going to connect it into here. All right, now that I've scraped the document, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to need to store it in a place that I query. So this is where I'm going to add in my vector store. So I'm going to use a Pinecone data store, vector store for this. We've created that index previously, and I'm going to add it here. I'm going to specify my API key. So I'll go ahead and do that. Pinecone environment. So this is the region which this Pinecone vector store resides. That's my console. And then we're going to use the index that we created called course. And in here, we're just going to create a new namespace, NVIDIA. So this is where I'm going to host this information. All right, now I'm going to connect this document to this document here, and I'm going to use my OpenAI embedding. So I'll go and add the OpenAI embeddings here. So this is simply how I encode this information so that my vector database can store this information. All right, I'll add my API key in here, and then I will connect it. The last thing I'm going to do is connect this Pinecone upsert document, connect this to a conversation. Right. So I will this chain here and pick conversational retrieval QA chain. So I'm just going to hook this up here. And then I'm going to also use the OpenAI language model for this. Okay, I'll input my API key here. And then I'm going to connect it to the model. And then I'm going to now save this flow. I'm going to call it NVIDIA. And then I'm going to run it. So when I run it, what's going to happen is that this flow will go into this substack, and then it's going to break it up in chunks and then upload it into this vector store called Pinecone. And then I'm going to use that information then to query it. So let's just do an example here. Okay, let's go ahead and start asking some questions. Let's start with the CFO. What did she have to say? So we'll just say, the CFO have to say. All right, it's a pretty good explanation here. Mentioning that generative AI is driving exponential growth. If I go down to here, it's looking at this. So it looks correct. And I'm going to ask another question. What were some recent announcements? All right, we'll look at that as well. Recent announcements. So there's a whole bunch of recent announcements here. I think it's picked up on. Great. And then lastly, just to finish testing this out, the article just talk about the valuation. So why don't we Some pretty good answers.
A very common use case is to chat with your PDF. In this module, we're going to be building an AI app that chats with multiple PDF files. Specifically, we're going to look at 3 quarterly earnings reports, and we'll gain insights on a shipping company called Flex LNG. Additionally, we're going to use metadata to improve the quality of the results.
Okay, let's get started to build this flow. As always, I am in the home screen and I'm going to add a new flow. I'm going to first go to my document loader and I have 3 PDFs. So what I'm going to do is drag this PDF file as a document loader, and I'm going to select the first file. Let's start with the first quarter 2023 of these results. So this is the earnings reports for this company called Flex LNG. All right, so I'm gonna select that, and that is my first report. All right, I'm going to then select my next one, and I'm just gonna copy this, and I'm going to add fourth quarter PDF, and I'll do one more for the third quarter. Okay, and I'll specify that here. All right, so what this will do is that it's going to load the 3 documents. Now what I'm going to do is to add in a text splitter. Okay, so this chunks up the documents so that it can be stored in the vector store. So as always, I'm going to use this recursive character splitter. And I've noticed that a smaller chunk size of 500 and 100 overlap works well for this document. I'll do this. Connect to here. Connect to that. Okay. So what I've done is I've asked it to load these 3 documents and split it. Now, what I'm going to do with result is I'm going to insert that into a vector store. And so here is in my vector store, and I'm going to use my Pinecone vector store. And I'm going to now just add in what is the model that I'm going to use to create the embeddings. So I'll search for embeddings here. Use the OpenAI embeddings. Okay, so I'm going to wire up all these documents here. Oops. All right, I've got that, and I'm going to wire up my embeddings. Okay, I already have my Pinecone API key set, and then my environment. I'll add that. Index here is course, and I'm going to use LNG namespace. Okay. And great. So I have my documents wired up, and then now I'm going to hook up my Pinecone vector store into a conversational retrieval chain. All right, so in this conversational retrieval chain, I will add the link here, and then I'm going to use, again, also the large language model from OpenAI. Right, so I'll select chat models here, okay? And I will wire this up. And I'm going to add in my API key. Here. All right. So what this application will do is it's going to load these 3 PDF files. It's going to insert, or in this case, we call it upsert, into the vector store. It's going to store it into the Pinecone index called course, and the namespace that we have specified is FLNG namespace. And then we add all of this, wrap up everything up in a conversational retrieval QA chain. All right, I'm just going to save it now. I'm going to call it FLNG results. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give these PDFs some meta information. So for example, what is the year? What is the quarter of the PDF file? This allows me to give the chatbot additional information when it queries my vector store. So when we look at the chatbot and interact with it, we'll be able to see that in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the additional parameters, and I'm going to start adding the meta information to it. So I'm going to add a key, year. All right. And then inside here, I'm going to add my value. So this is 2023. All right. So I'm also going to add the quarter. And this is 1Q. So this is the meta information for the first quarter results, year 2023 and quarter 1Q. So I'm just going to repeat that for the next 2. I'm going to add the key name, again, year, save that, and then I'm going to add, this is the 2022 results, and I'm going to add another one here, which is, again, quarter, and specify here the quarter is 4Q. All right. Year and my quarter. Okay. And lastly, for the third PDF, I will do the same thing. Go into here to add year. Specify here is 2022. And quarter is third quarter. Okay, so I've just added the meta information for this. I'll save it again. Okay, now we're going to test it out. I'm just going to ask it, what is the TCE rate for first quarter 2023? So time charter equivalent rate. This is an important metric for Flex LNG. So what it's doing is it's taking this meta information, first quarter 2023, and it will route that information through the Pinecone vector store to the appropriate PDF file that has that information. So I'm going to now ask it for fourth quarter 2022. All right, and it's doing the same thing for the fourth quarter results. And lastly, I'll ask for the third quarter. All right. Now that we've built our application with this vector store and inserting, or in this case, we call it upserting all the information in the PDF files for us to work with in this chatbot, and then we've done unit testing, we're going to replace this because we're in production. We're going to need to make some changes so that we don't keep inserting this data over and over again every time we query. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this and remove the PDF documents, and I'm going to replace it with a different component, and you'll see which component next. All right, so I'm going to add into here a vector store that is also Pinecone, but notice here, instead of an upsert document, I have Pinecone load existing index because we have already an existing index. All right, so I'm going to add my Pinecone information with the API key. Once again, the environment, the region, and then my index is course, and my namespace here is FLNG namespace. All right, and I'm gonna again connect to the embeddings, and I'm going to now hook this up again to the conversational retrieval agent. Okay, and I'll just change the temperature to 0. All right, so this is now FLNG with loading existing. Okay. All right, so let's save it and try it. All right, as before, I'm going to enter in a query on the time charter equivalent rates for XLMG. So what is the TCE rate for first quarter 2023? Right, so it's going to go into my Pinecone vector store, and it's going to pull up the information based on the meta information for first quarter. Fourth quarter. Okay, and then just finish off for the third quarter of last year. Perfect. In this video, we're going to talk about this feature called return source documents within the conversational retrieval QA chain component. Let me just turn it on and show you what it does, and then I'll explain it. So I'll turn this on, save, and then I'll start asking it questions. So let's ask a question that we asked before. What is the TCE rate for the first quarter 2023? All right, so it gave us the answer like before, but notice that it gave us some additional information. So this is information. If I click on one of these buttons, it gives you the source content from which this information is derived. So in this case, as you can recall, the document is first quarter 2023, so it's got the document right. And this is the chunk of text that it found related to this question. So in this case, you see here, average time charter equivalent of 80,175 in first quarter. So it gives you a really good feeling and a verification method that what it actually got back was aligned to what's actually in the source document. All right. It returns other things as well. And you can see here that there's a duplicate. So this is actually another way to use this information because it is an indication that when we upserted or added information into our Pinecone store, there may have been duplicates that we accidentally added. So this is a good indication that something is not quite right in terms of having duplicates. You can also see that this segment here, it is actually the amount of text that we got per chunk. So we can adjust the size when we ingest the data, but it can kind of give you information that this is kind of the size of each of the text that it's looking at in terms of evaluation. Now I'm just going to also show you other information here. So again, this gives you further information, and it tells you also the specific line number. All right, now I'm going to ask another question. So in this question, I'm going to show you that it'll pick up a different source. So I'll like this. What was the TCE rate for fourth quarter 2022? All right, and I'll answer the question, and then also we'll now give you the reference. All right, so in this case, it's the 2022 fourth quarter document, and this is the information that it found it in. So in this case, it found the information the fourth quarter is right here, fourth quarter. And it also gives you further information. It's from lines 31 to 75 on page number 2. So you can actually go back to the original PDF and find that information. So it gives you a really good way to validate that what the chat is retrieving is consistent with what was the original source.
A very popular use case is to embed a chatbot within a website so that you can help visitors of your website to locate information in an easy manner. For example, have a chat box bubble in the lower right hand of the page that a user can expand to engage in a chat conversation with the data that you have trained the chatbot on. In this section, we're going to show step-by-step how this can be done in Flowise.
I've loaded a flow on the screen that we've built before. This flow represents information from an earnings report from a company called Flex LNG. As you recall, in this vector data store, we have 3 PDFs representing 3 different quarters of earnings reports. And this chat flow, I can test out within Flowise itself. So I'm just going to give an example of that. So I'm going to ask it, what is the TCE rate, time chart equivalent rate for first quarter 2023? And it shows also the document information from where it got the information. So you can be assured that the information is correct. So it's showing me it was from the first quarter 2023 earnings report, and this was the snippet that it matched it to, and it has the right information. So we have this information answered properly, trained within our vector store. I'm just going to take this website as an example. So we have the Flex LNG website that I've saved as a HTML file, and then I'm going to use that HTML file to make the modifications that are needed. All right, I'm going to go back to my Flex LNG PDF flow, and I'm going to select the button here at the top. In this button here, you see at the top, Embed, Python, JavaScript, and curl. So this gives you different options to be able to access your flow. So I'm going to use the embed option. So this script here, I'm just going to copy. So Flowise has a really nice feature that allows you to then take this snippet of code and insert that into your HTML page and have that chatbot appear right on the HTML page. I've opened up the HTML page that represents the FlexLNG homepage. And I've also copied the snippet of code that we saw in the Flowwise diagram before. What I'm going to do is navigate to the body part of this HTML file, and then I'm simply going to copy this into the body, and then I'll save it. Now that I've saved the HTML file with the code snippet, I'm going to notice here at the lower right corner a new bubble. This bubble now, if I click on it, is a chatbot that executes the same flow that we had in the Flowwise diagram. So let's just test it out and see if we get exactly the same information. So I'm going to ask it again the same question. What is the TCE rate for first quarter 2023? Right. So exactly the same information, and it also gives you the references for where it found the information. So you can see here that it's the same first quarter 2023 from this PDF file, and this is the information that it derived from. I'm going to just test it again with a similar question. And as you can see here, it also returned the correct answer and gave you the context in which it used to find the answer. So very powerful ability to take your custom data and embed that into any website you would like.
In this project, we're going to build a chatbot that understands the FAQ, or frequently asked questions, of a website and can answer questions from a user in a natural language way. We're going to use as an example the FAQs from the popular ride service Lyft. We're going to build this in 3 parts. In part 1, we're going to build the flow to collect information from the website and then store that in a vector store. In part 2, we're going to build the flow to query the information. And in part 3, we're going to embed the flow into a website and customize the chat interface.
In this video, I'm going to show how to automatically collect the information from a website and use that to create a chatbot. I'll be using Lyft, a popular ride-sharing platform, as an example. Here we see the frequently asked questions. As you can see, it's very comprehensive. What I want to do is automatically collect this information, store that, and then be able to use a chatbot to retrieve that information in a natural language way. Okay, so let's start building this flow. As usual, I start with the add new. And the first thing I'm going to add into the canvas is one document loader called Cheerio Web Scraper. So as you can see here, the purpose of this web scraper is to go to a website and then get the information and then be able to connect that to a vector store. All right, so I'm going to select this and I'm going to do the usual thing. I'm going to now add my text splitter. So my text splitter is what chunks up the information into segments that can then be vectorized and then uploaded to the vector store. So in the text splitter section, I'm going to use my recursive text splitter. And then I'm going to connect the two. And then I'm going to have a little bit of an overlap just so that there's more context information. All right, so this 2 boxes will go to a website that I specify. So in this case, I will pick the website that points to the FAQ. And then now I'm going to add in a vector store. So this vector store will be a Pinecone vector store that I'm going to upsert or insert into. And as you can see here, I can connect my documents. And what I'm going to do is add in what I'm going to use to embed this information. So embedding is the process of converting text into a set of vector numbers. So I'm going to use my OpenAI embedding engine, and I'm going to connect it to here. I'm going to then add the various API keys that I need. So OpenAI, then my Pinecone. So this is my vector data store, Pinecone environment, and the index. Okay. Let's also add my namespace. So the namespace is where I can keep this collection of information. So I'll go ahead and add in here that it is lift FAQ. And I'm going to just leave the default top K to 4. So this is you can specify this number, and we can go through that later in the tutorial, where when you fetch the information, this is the amount of information that it will fetch per query. So we'll leave it as default for now. So we'll go ahead and save it. And then this will be my lift. Sorry. Okay. So this is my flow that will go to this website, and it will go and crawl the website and then upsert into my vector store. Now there's one last thing I need to do. In order to have it to recurse, that is go multiple levels into your website, you have to turn this on. And then this parameter here, web scrape links limit. So this is how many links you want it to crawl. Okay, so let's start with 10 and then see. All right, so we'll just save. Okay, now we need to add an additional component. So this component is my conversational agent. So I'm going to go to my chains, and then I'm going to select conversational retrieval QA chain. So this is what takes the input from the user and calls into the vector store. So I'm going to specify my language model, and I'm going to use my OpenAI language model also here. So I'll go ahead and specify that. I will also hook up the Pinecone retriever into the vector store retriever. All right. And then I'm going to input my API keys here as well. And I'm going to specify the temperature as 0. So temperature of 0 means that there's less creativity for the language model, so it's more factual. So I'll do that. I'll save it, and then I'll start using it. And the first question I use on it, it will go and execute this flow, go to the website, scrape it, and then insert all the elements into the Pinecone vector store. So I'll just say, how do I hail a ride? Right. So it's going through that process right now and starting to load up the vector store. So what's happening underneath the covers when you first ask the first question is that it's going to scrape the website, and it's going to populate my Pinecone vector store. As you can see in this web page here, the total vectors that was inserted into the vector store, it was initially 0, and now it's added 792 vectors. Okay, so after it's inserted all the vectors into the vector store that represents the website information, it is able to give you the answer to your question. So I'm just going to give it a few more questions just to see that it is working. I'm going to go right from here and ask some questions and then just validate the answers. Right. So I'm just going to again ask a couple of questions. How to rate your driver. All right. So I'll go and ask this question here. Okay, you can rate your driver on a scale of 1 to 5. The stars with 5 being the highest. You can rate the driver on the rate and pay screen at the end of each ride. So I'm just going to go into here and just validate. You can rate your driver on a scale. So it's found this information. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's do a couple more. The next question I'm going to ask is, how do I estimate the cost of a Lyft ride? All right, so I'll just copy this question and I'll validate this afterwards. Okay, so I'll go to my screen and ask how to estimate the cost of a Lyft ride. Right, so it tells you you can go to the fare estimate feature in the Lyft app. So in here, all right, it shows you here that you can get a fare estimate through the web by using Lyft's fare estimator. All right, so it's able to find that information for you. Let's do one more. How do you tip your driver? So I'll ask this question. All right, and it gives you information about the specifics of this. And let's see. All right, so it gives you information about you can tip up to 74 hours after a ride is complete. And there's details like that in this query as well. So it looks like it's done a pretty good job at taking the information and summarizing it so that a vector store can be able to be queried. In the previous section, we built a flow that we used to upsert or insert into the Pinecone document everything that we scraped from our website, and then we queried it. Now, we want to build a flow that is similar but does not need the upserting or inserting operation because once you insert it, we primarily want to just query it. So what I'm going to do is start with this flow, the upsert flow, and then I'm going to just duplicate the chat flow so that I get my starting point. All right. So I'm going to change this Pinecone upsert document component into a slightly different one. So if you go into the vector store, you'll see also another similar icon, but instead of Pinecone upsert document, you're going to have Pinecone load existing index. So this is essentially a read only. So after you've loaded it, now you primarily want to just use it and ask questions. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to insert it here. And I don't need this component anymore. So this web scraper is primarily used for populating the vector store. I'll delete that as well as this component. All right. And then I will wire this up again. So I will go here and wire it up here. And then I will also add my API keys. So I have my Pinecone API key and the region, as well as the index, which is a course. All right. And I have my namespace is Lyft AQ. right? And I will wire this up here, and then I'm going to save it and name it lift query. I'm going to do one additional thing. I'm going to turn on this return source document. So I'm going to press this button, and then I'll show you what it does. So I'll save this flow, and I'm going to start my query. I'm going to say, how do I hail a ride? So what it's doing here is, again, going into my vector store with this new flow. And this vector store is represented by just a read-only or load existing index. So it will go in here and request that information from this store. And when it comes back, it's going to not only return the context to answer the question, but also the source document. So you can see here, if I click on here, it'll tell me where it got that information, right? So this is where it found the information from, and this is actually the source of that information. So if I select this and then I open that URL, this is where it got this information. Now, the next thing I want to just highlight is if you go to the additional parameters, you can actually control how many of the vectors you return. So for example, if you said, I just want the top two, right? We'll go ahead and see what happens. So I'll save it, and then I'll rerun this again. I'll say, how do I hail a ride? Notice before I had 4 source documents. Now that I've specified my k parameter to be 2 in the pinecone load existing index component, see what happens. So it's just going to give you the top 2. All right. So there's some flexibility here in terms of what you can ask from the vector store, and then also whether or not you want to display the return source documents so that you can verify the information as you look at um, the results. In this video, we're going to show how to embed the information that you have collected from the frequently asked questions into a website chat widget so that a user going to the website can interact with that information that you've collected in a natural language way. For illustration purposes, I've picked a sample website and a sample HTML file that we can use to customize. So let's take a look at what's in this HTML. So I've opened up this HTML index.html within my code editor, and it's what you expect, a very simple boilerplate that has various different sections in the HTML body. Now I'm going to use this, and I'm going to insert the code snippet that will enable my chat bubble to appear on the website. Okay, now I'm back into my flow, the lift query flow that we created earlier. Now what I'm going to do is select this top right button, and there's 4 sections at the top. This is how you can interact with the flow that you built. You can do that through embedding, through Python, through JavaScript, or through curl. So we're going to use embedding, and I'm going to select this checkbox here, show embedded chat config. So this gives me a lot more flexibility in terms of the customization. So I'll select this, and I will go ahead and copy this code. Now I'm going to use this code into my code editor. Now I'm back into my index.html page, and I'm going to insert the snippet that I just copied into the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for IP tag. And then I'm going to paste the code snippet that I got from Flowise. As you can see, it inserts this script section, and it has a number of details which we'll go through later. But now why don't we just save this and then see how it looks. So I'm going to now open a default browser. Okay, in the browser, you can see the previous web page. And then now there's also now a new button. So this button was not there before, and it is inserted by the code that we just added into the HTML file. So if I open this button, it'll tell me, hello, this is a custom welcome message. So I can start asking questions. So how do I hail a bride? All right, so it's connected to the information that I scraped, and when I ask the question, it will go and execute the flow and then provide me with that answer. So it seems to be working well. Now let's see what we can do to customize this. So let's walk through this script in a little bit more detail in terms of the different things that it has and what you can customize. So first, what you can see is the chat flow ID. So this is the flow that, this is the ID that when you call into your server, into your Flowise server, it identifies which flow you want to execute. In this case, it's our lift query flow. And then this is the host. And then these, in the theme JSON here, there is button. So you can customize what's the background color and the placement and the size of the button. You can also change a custom icon for this button. And further down here, you can customize the welcome message. You can customize the avatar or the profile pic for the bot. And also you can customize the avatar or profile pic also for the user. And then you can also customize the text input in terms of the placeholder that you see at the bottom. So let's just make a couple of changes and see how this works. So I'll just make a very simple one. I'll just change my welcome message first. Hello, welcome to the site. Right, and then I'll change the default placeholder here. Okay, so I'll say, please type your question. Go ahead and save that. And then I will see how this looks like in the browser. All right, let's look at this now. So I'm gonna select this, and you can see it changed welcome to the site, and the bottom is please type your questions. All right, so I'm just gonna make another change, and then we'll see that also reflected. One of the things that you probably want to do is change this icon here. So we'll go ahead and make that change and see how that looks like in this after we make the change. Okay, I'm just going to now make some changes to the avatar. So I'm going to change from the parrot icon to my own custom one. So I have one saved in this URL that I will just cut and paste into here so that we use this instead. So I'll go into here and select this new URL. I'll save it, and then we'll go ahead and see how it looks like. Okay, so let's see if that change is taking into effect. So I'll go ahead and take a look at my screen again, and sure enough, I have a new avatar picture that is shown here. And then the previous changes I've made are also here. So let's see if this continues to work. How do I hail a ride? Right, so it continues to work in the same way that we expected when we ask questions. And of course, you can change the color of this response. You can change this avatar and various other things. So lots of customizations that you can do. But now let me just close off this video in just to point out one additional thing. So this widget now is connected to the flow that we built. Now, what if you want to make some changes to the flow? How will it get reflected in terms of this widget? So let me just make a quick change just to show you how this would look like. So I'm going back to my flow here, the lift query flow. Now, I'm going to select this button, Return Source Documents. So as you recall, when I select this, when it queries the Pinecone vector store, it's going to return the source documents. And what this says here is that I want to also display that within my chat window. So I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to now save the chat flow. Now I'm going to go back to my example. All right, I'm going to now ask the same question. Okay, so it's giving me the same answer, but it's also enabled the source context, right? So it went back to the flow, it took the modifications, and now when I click on this, it now gives me additional information on what the reference was or what the source was originally that I used to collect this information. So just to sum up, there are a lot of customization options that are available when embedding the chat flow into your website. Additionally, as you make changes to the flow logic itself, it will automatically be updated to the embedded chat bubble.
In this project, we're going to look at how we can add web browsing capabilities into our chatbot. This is useful to enable functionalities such as summarizing a web page. To do this, we'll include the web browsing tool into our flows and enable it through a component called Conversational Agent that combines the tools with the contextual memory.
In this video, we're going to show you how to build and add new capabilities into the chatbot to browse the internet. We're going to start by adding in a tool component called Web Browser, and then start adding the components it needs. All right, so we're going to go get a language model, and we're also going to get embeddings. So it'll need that component to help parse the website. Okay, and then I'm just going to quickly hook that up. Right. Okay, now I'm going to add a component from the agents palette called conversational agent. So you can think of this agent, conversational agent, is just an abstraction that allows us to specify within this chat what are the tools it needs to use, what's the language model it needs to use, as well as the memory to retain the message history, the chat history. Okay, so I'm going to add this in here, and I will hook up the web browser as the tool. So this agent will know how to invoke the web browser as I link it to that. And then I'm going to use the chat OpenAI model. So I'll go ahead and add this in here. And then I will also add in this memory component. So this memory allows me to specify where to store the message history so that in each call into the large language model, it has the context. So I'll go into this palette and then just specify buffer memory. And then I'll hook up into here. And then I'll add in my API keys. Just a quick recap of what I've done here. So I've created a web browser tool from the tool palette that allows me to browse a website and summarize the website. I've hooked that up into a component called conversational agent, which allows me to specify what are the tools I want to use in this chat conversation, in this chatbot, as well as the memory that I use to hold the contextual information. Right. So I'm going to now just save it and run it. Okay. Now I'm going to specify a website that just summarizes some analysis on Elon Musk. So I'm going to just say, please summarize. All right, so it's going through that web page, it's reading it, and then it's summarizing it, and then it'll provide an output here. Okay, now just so that you can see that it understands and remembers the context in terms of the chat, what went before, I'm just going to continue this conversation and then refer to the previous result. Right, so I'm going to write another request to write a poem in a comedic tone that expresses the above summary. So it'll need to understand what happened before. Right, Elon Musk, oh, what a man, electric cars, his master plan, Tesla charging stations, more than any other Ford and GM. Now they're a brother $3 billion in revenue, and etc. So pretty good. Right, so this is a great example of adding one tool. Now, what if you want to add a second tool so that in addition to having the ability to browse the web, we're also want the ability to query a vector store that has information that we're interested in. So I'm just going to reuse an example that we have previously with the Lift FAQ. So I'm going to include that into this conversational agent as the set of allowed tools. So let's go ahead and build that out. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out my vector store. So I'm going to load that information, and then I'm going to hook this up, create the embeddings. So I'll use the embeddings here again, and I'll hook it up. Okay, I'll specify my pinecone key. And also the environment and index. And it's coming from my Lift FAQ. And then I'll specify my API key. And then now I'm going to do like what I did before and add in a conversational QA chain. All right, so I will go ahead and add that. Let me save this and refresh. Okay, let me go and add the conversational chain. And I will go and hook this up here. I'll specify my language model again. All right. Okay. Specify my language model, and then specify my API key as well. Okay, now I just need one more thing. there needs to be in a kind of like think of it as like a little adapter. So this is a conversational retrieval QA chain, but I need it to look like a tool inside, so that conversational agent can hook up to it. So there is this little adapter that allows me to do that. So it's a a a chain under the tools. So it's a chain tool that I'm just going to drag into here. Oops, save it. Oops, I'll save it again. Refresh. I will specify the tools, chain tool, and I'll hook up the conversational retrieval QA chain to the base chain. And then I'll also hook up the chain tool to the loud tools. And I'm just going to tell the conversational agent when to use this chain tool. So this is for the Lyft ride service FAQ. And it's useful for FAQ information, ride sharing service. So I will then save it. And now I've added another tool capability into my conversational agent. So let's try it. So I'm going to ask now, how do I hail a ride? Right. So it went into when we called this, when we asked this question, the conversational agent will try to figure out, based on the tools that we hooked up, what is the most reasonable tool to use. In this case, it realized hailing a ride, likely you want this tool. And then so it went and called this tool with this conversational agent, retrieval QA chain, and then went to the Pinecone load existing index and got that information. Okay, so that's it. We have the ability to hook up multiple tools within our conversational agent. So you can extend this to more than two tools. You can have 3 or 4 or 5 or however many that you want. So this can be quite a powerful mechanism to allow additional flexibility into your chatbot.
In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to chat with your PDF data right inside ChatGPT itself without writing one single line of code. This will be done in 2 steps. The first step will be to create the AI application that understands your private PDF file, and the second step will be to create the ChatGPT plugin itself. In this tutorial, we'll be using 2 tools, Flowise AI for step 1 and LangDoc for step 2.
So let's begin. What does the end user experience look like? After we build this project, we're going to see in the ChatGPT plugin store a plugin that we have built, and the information for that plugin is here, and it's local to us that we can use. So let's see how it works. I'm going to ask a question that ChatGPT will figure out that it's our plugin that needs to get called, and we'll call that plugin to get the specific answer to that private PDF that I've trained my AI application to answer with. So you can see it's calling our plugin with this question. And then our plugin will answer and then give the answer back.
Let's dive into step 1, creating an AI app with Flowise.
The PDF that we're going to use for this example is a simple one. It is a earnings report from this company Triton, and it has highlights, financial results, operating performance, and many things that you may expect to see in an earnings report. I'm going to go into my Chatwise AI main screen and add a new flow. You can start with some of the templates, but I wanted to build this from scratch so that you can see how the components fit together as you build them. So this is a blank canvas. I'm going to add a node. First node I'm going to add is related to a chain. Okay, so I'm going to add the conversational retrieval Q&A chain here. Next, I'm going to specify the large language model that I'm going to use. Okay, so I'll specify OpenAI as my large language model. And I'm going to start hooking up these two components. I'm going to add my API key. Then I'm going to start connecting that large language model into this chain. Next, I'm going to build out the vector store. Just think of a vector store as the database for the information that we want to query. I'm going to use something called Pinecone. More about that in another video. And Pinecone will have its own API key as well. I'll specify that. And the environment is this one that was set up. And then this was more experiment, so I'll put that down. And then this is just earnings as the namespace. Okay. So we've inputted these 3 boxes already, and now I'm going to also connect this Pinecone retriever into the conversational agent. All right. Next, I'm going to now tell it which PDF file. So in here, there is a PDF loader. So I'll specify PDF loader here. And I'm going to tell it which file. And then I'm going to hook up this into my vector store. All right. Next, we're going to need some way to convert this text, this PDF file, into something that this vector data store understands. And this is called an embeddings component. So we'll add an embeddings component in here. And again, I'll specify the API key for OpenAI. Lastly, I'm going to add in this text splitter. Okay, so I'll use a recursive text splitter. And I'm going to chunk it 1,000 and chunk overlap of 200. And now I'm going to connect it into here. And then I'll also connect my OpenAI embeddings into here. All right, so this is your flow right here. All right, so what it's going to do is look at the PDF file. It's going to use this recursive character text splitter to chunk it or split it into various pieces. And then it's going to insert it into this vector database using this embedding. So this is a way to essentially codify the text. And then we're going to put it together with this conversational retrieval QA chain. So why don't we just save it and chat with earnings. All right, now that we've saved it, why don't we start running it and ask it some questions. I'm going to ask it what was the earnings for the first quarter. And it should be about 136 million. That's correct. And I'm going to ask it how many outstanding shares were repurchased. That's 1.7 million. And lastly, just to test it out a little bit more, I'm going to ask it what was the adjusted return on equity. So for Triton, it was about 22.5% for the first quarter. All right, there you go.
Now that we've created the AI application that is trained on the PDF data, let's dive into step 2, creating the ChatGPT plugin using LangDoc.
All right, in this section, we're going to show how to create the ChatGPT plugin itself using a service called LangDoc. So what I'm going to do is create the new plugin, and I'm going to name it Finance. Call it Finance, and the description I'm going to use for this plugin will be plugin for information about Triton earnings report. The description for the model, this is a especially important field, and I want to highlight here, use this field as a prompt of what your plugin can do and how it should act. Okay, so it's especially important to tell ChatGPT how to use this. So I'm going to say this plugin is useful for getting earnings information for the company. And I'm going to tell it how to call it with the arguments. So arguments to the call will be a question. That is the question that is passed into it by ChatGPT. And this question, this argument will have value user question. So that's especially important. Now I'm going to upload the icon. All right, I'll save. So that's the first part of it. Now that I've created the outline for the application, for the plugin application, I'm going to create the API itself. All right, I'm going to add a new folder. I'm going to call it earnings. And I'm going to start a post request. And I'm just going to call it earnings. Call this earnings ID. And I'm going to summarize this. That gets information on Triton earnings. And I'm going to name it. Now, this URL, this is a URL to the service that we've built, the AI application that is exposed through Flowise. So I'll show you how to get that URL. So I go back to my screen here. This is my Flowise screen. And at the bottom or at the top right, there is this API endpoint. So I'm just going to go to the API endpoint here. And I'm going to now paste that into my LangDoc URL. Okay, now I'm going to then also say, all right, what is the response? I need to add response code. So successful. And I'm going to create a schema for it so that it knows the value of the argument that I'm going to pass in. Just create an object. This is a question. And I'm going to add a property to it. And it's just going to be a string. All right, the string is a question. And then this is a required field. All right. All right, I'm going to name this schema. And then I'm going to go into the API again. And then I'm going to start using the schema. So I've selected the schema, and then I've selected question. And then I'm going to save it. All right, it's ready to use. Now I'm just going to go deployment. So in here for your plugin, LangDoc will create a URL that represents the information for your plugin. So I'll copy that. And now I'm going to go into my ChatGPT user interface, and then I'm going to now add this plugin that we created. Oops, I'll start a new session. I'll go to the store. Inside here, there is this tab here called Develop Your Own Plugin. So I'll press that. I'll paste the information that I got from LangDoc. And now ChatGPT is processing it, and it's found the plugin information. And next, go ahead and install it. And now it's enabled. Okay, so why don't we try it out? I'm going to ask a question that ChatGPT will figure out that it's our plugin that needs to get called, and will call that plugin to get the specific answer to that private PDF that I've trained my AI application to answer with. So you can see it's calling our plugin with this question. And then our plugin will answer and then give the answer back.
There are many deployment options that you have once you are ready to put your flow into production. For example, Render, Railway, Riplet, AWS, DigitalOcean, and Google Cloud Platform are all viable options. I'll walk you through the first one, Render. It is quite popular, and it is one of the best value in terms of monthly costs.
Let's get started. I'm in the Render homepage, and then I'm going to go to my dashboard. So I've already signed up for the service, and now I'm selecting the dashboard. So I'm just going to create at the top a new web service. Now I want to start by pointing it to the Flowwise Git repo. So this is where the functionality resides in terms of the code base. So I'm going to take this repo here, and I'm going to select it as the public Git repo. I'm going to give it a name, Flowwise Production, and I'm going to select Node as the runtime. For the build command, the documentation says I need to add in one more step here before I build. I need to install. I'm going to select the starter because this is the plan that gives me the first production level instance. So it starts at $7 a month, or rather, it is $7 a month. And then I'm going to go and start. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and build my Flowwise service. After about 10 minutes, it finished build, and now it's deploying. So we'll take the output of this deploy, and once it's done, we will go ahead and take a look at this render service. All right, it's initialized. So I'll go ahead. So I'll copy this URL here and put it. There you go. Our render service is live and ready to be put into production.